And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Mike Ames Recruitment Show. Once again, we've been colossally let down by Kirsty Ames, the supposed host of this show, who has once again gallivanted off around the world, just living her young, child-free life, really, which sickens and angers me. Mike, are we going to deal with this? This is getting out of hand. Oh.
Well, she'd just take holiday, and she's not realised yet we've not paid her because she's not here, she's not working. Why should she get paid? But that's Kirsty, though, isn't it? Bless her.
Tis, bless her indeed. So today we are here to do a little bit of a case study examination. We're joined by Ro. Hello, Ro. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure's all mine.
Very good. Marvellous. Very kind of you to say. So Ro has got a really exceptional story that he's been through over the last 8 years, building a significant business. And Mike, it's not just the numbers, though. That's not the reason you've asked Ro to come here today. There's more to it than that, isn't there?
No, it isn't. And before I explain in detail why I want Ro on the show, I'm in the north at the moment and the signal's a bit dodgy. I kind of stick a little bit, they'll press on without me. Apparently Peter thinks that's an advantage if I'm not speaking. So yeah, the reason I wanted Ro to come on the show, I had a conversation with the world, and I'm saying it reminded me of me in the 90s because they're very different. Ro's not me, more successful, I'd like to say, but I certainly think I recognised his style of business and his approach and liked it and found it attractive, and obviously it's been very successful too. So I wanted him to come on the show as his CEO, co-founder. Come on, just kind of share this and we can have a little discussion around it. So that was the purpose that sat behind it all. So Ro, could you just say a few words about Forsyth Barnes and just kind of fill us in on the journey a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So we just come to the end of our 8th year, set up with myself and Scott, my co-founder, in 2016. Global business now, pushing 80 heads globally, operating 3 core sectors being fintech, what we call e-tail, which is more your online digital part of the retail brand, and sports and entertainment as well. And we operate in the mid to senior exec space. So it's been an incredible journey so far, but still a lot to do.
And you've got offices in the United Kingdom, and also, I think you said North America. And did you say you're exploring the possibility of the Middle East? Did I pick that up correctly?
Yeah, so we've got a good client base out in the Middle East. So we've got London and Nottingham as our 2 main hubs in the UK, and we're growing those out as well. We've got New York, where we've got people out there and growing an office there. And then the 2 next ones from there are West Coast America, so potentially in LA. May do a San Fran because we're building a tech platform at the moment as well. So one of those 2 locations for the West Coast. And then we've got a good client base out in the Middle East. We're trying to do more and more in that kind of Saudi football space as well. So it leads well for us to go and potentially set up a Dubai office in the next 18 months or so, ideally. And then that starts to open up Asia for us as well.
I've got a client in Dubai, and he loves it out there. It's quite a large company too, and he really likes it there. So I bet you look forward to that. Get yourself out there, yeah.
It's exciting. It comes with its challenges. Don't know how we're going to manage 3 continents, the time zones, and visiting the offices and so on. But it's a challenge that needs solving, right? Which is a bit that excites me the most.
I think the answer, if I can be simplistic about it, is really, really, really good regional managers, I think. Because you can't manage it from London, that's for damn sure. So, I think that would appear to be the way forward. But you already know that anyway from your New York office, don't you?
Yeah. And look, my ideal is I'm out in Dubai with them and move out there as well. There's benefits for the kids and so on as well. And I've got just under a 2-year period where my eldest leaves his current school, my youngest would start school. So if we are going to do it, that'd be the kind of perfect time as well for them to not be too disrupted. So I've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and you've already done a lot of work as well. And we were talking about this a little bit, and you mentioned a phrase which I love, which was stepping stones. Every new challenge, once succeeded, becomes a stepping stone to just open up the next challenge. So given your track record, I suspect it'll be. And can we talk a little bit about that, really? Because 8 years from you and Scott with presumably a mobile phone and a LinkedIn account to what we have just described, that's quite a journey. Can you just take us through it a little bit, how you went from there to where you are now?
Yeah, so look, the first, I say office, it was a sold cupboard, if I'm being really honest. And I remember it clearly because we didn't have any windows and we're just staring at the same wall every time. We'd got one of those cheap IKEA style London skyline pictures, got the duct tape, the black duct tape, put an edge round it, put a line down vertically, put a line horizontally. That was our window. And that's what we used to look out to. So we're in the heart of London, we're busy and the rest of it. And that kind of kept us going on some of the darker days and so on as well. But we've come from that, the two of us, where you couldn't open the door unless one of us moved our chairs as well, took it to a King's Cross office, started hiring people there very quickly, went from there to our own space in Old Street. And I remember, because it was around the time of the Borough Market attacks, where Scott was looking after the business and running the business, and I was doing the painting, decorating, desk building in that new office because we didn't want to pay for someone else to do it. We didn't have the spare cash at that time to do it, so it was all hands on deck. And then the rest of the team would come in and help in the evenings, and my friends, and the weekends to help the final builds. And we put that kitchen together and everything in there ourselves as well. So we've gone from that to overlooking one of the most famous streets in New York, opening up London, opening up Knots, and now we're in New York, and we're overlooking one of the most famous streets, 20 floors up, a lovely space, internal meeting rooms in New York, and it's a world away from where we were over that time as well. And
we need to understand. We need to go through in this show really, like how you did that with the journey, I suppose, and we're going to dig in, I think, to certain things like getting people and keeping people and inspiring people and motivating people and getting the most out of people, and business development, obviously, which is a big thing. You're very, very keen on that. And we're going to end on that subject. But I just wanted to ask about that journey. Do you think, bearing in mind that I can't remember the exact figures, I think it's like 79% of UK recruitment companies bill less than £1 million. They bill that. It's not about profit. And 83 or 84% have got less than 10 staff. Half of them are solopreneurs, right? So You're talking a lot of the industry being very small, and yet there you have booked that trend. Two questions for you. Do you think that your mental attitude has had a big part to play in that, the way you see things? And have you changed over that period? You personally, have you changed over that period?
I think massively changed. To answer the second question first, I think we've both massively developed and changed. And I think coming into it, Scott's been with his wife Kay for as long as I've known him. So he's had a different kind of background and stability than I have. Whereas I was single at the time when we first set up FB. I've gone through that and got married and had kids since. So my responsibilities, my thought patterns have shifted. I never minded coming home at 10, 11 o'clock. I never minded the long commutes and so on at the beginning, because I didn't have, where am I going? I'm going back to an empty flat. So I'd rather work and I'd rather do the extra bits and spend time with the team and so on as well. Now I have the guilt of missing out on the evenings with my kids or putting them to bed and things as well. So that has hugely changed. Coming back to your first question, I heard once upon a time, and I wish I knew what the source was, but they talk about entrepreneurs and psychopaths have the same mental tendencies.
Really?
I have heard that. I've also lived with it.
It's entrepreneurs and serial killers have the same psychopathic tendencies, and the underlying belief, and that is under it all, is that they don't think they'll fail. A serial killer doesn't think that they'll get caught, right? And it's the same with us. I think I can't remember the last time I've gone into something thinking I'd fail. And probably the best non-work example I can give you of that is I went onto a golf course for the first time ever in 2020 with Scott. And he was having some coaching lessons at the time. But I genuinely went into that thinking, no one's asked me to do something that I'm not physically capable of doing. He's not got a God-given gift above me, which means that he can strike the ball better than I do. I've played cricket, so my hand-eye coordination is usually pretty all right. I'll beat him. And I genuinely went onto that golf course, not just thinking, not hoping, expecting me to beat him. And I did. I got nowhere near. I was awful. Golf's a lot harder than I thought.
Thank God. I thought we were going to have to cut this short, because if you said you just had a natural
Yeah,
talent,
no,
I was gone.
But I was genuinely upset at the end of it as well.
Yeah.
And so that probably, from a personal standpoint, that probably gives you a good example of anything that I go into from a business perspective or personal perspective. I expect to go out and achieve it. I don't go into it with a thingy of failure. In fact, a coach I was speaking to was saying to me that you even struggle to associate anything with the word failure, because I don't look at it.
Well, there's a couple of things. I'd never heard that psychopath before, but it kind of figures really. My previous business partner, Rob Malaband of Crimson fame, he's got exactly the same attitude, like 100%. And we went skiing. I'd skied before, and he'd never skied, and he was convinced he'd be doing black runs. And I remember on the first day, he was stuck at the top of a green run. He wouldn't come down in case he fell over and hurt himself. But when he got there, it was like, no, this is absolutely fine. 3 days, and I'll be coming down black runs. As it turned out, that wasn't true. But it's true, that mentality. I have a slightly different, not very different, but I'm aware of failure because I'm old and I failed a lot, really. But for me, that's just failure to do something once. Failure only happens when you give up. So if you'd never played golf again, then you failed to do that. If you keep going until eventually you beat Scott, then you'll succeed. And I think a lot of it is that mentality to recognize that failure is part of development and part of success.
100%.
It's not an end in itself until you say, I've stopped now, I've given up, in which case you failed, which I think is fine. But I think that's a really, really interesting point around about your mental kind of abilities there. Do you also think there's the thing with work ethic? You know, this recruiters tend to work quite hard, and yet not all of them are successful. So I wonder how much is to do with putting the hours in and how much is the old grey cells. What do you think there?
If I had to put it on a spectrum, I'd say greater push towards the work ethic side of it. I don't think you can get away with that in any field, let alone just our industry. But yeah, I think you have to channel that in the right places. I think you need some other parts around that, i.e. ambition, not having limiting beliefs, those types of things as well, which have to go hand in hand with the work ethic too. But I think, again, it depends what you're looking for. If you want to scale something, I think you need a different set of mind processes and mindsets. I think if it's something that is more of a lifestyle thing and you talked about up to 10 odd people, right? If that's what it is, and which is fine, that's what you want in your life. I do think probably work ethic is maybe an 80% job and 20% is some of that ambition and so on as well. So it depends what you're looking for me.
I think what I'd like to pick up, Mike, if I may, just conscious of time, and I want to keep the conversation moving forward. What you're describing there is something that's not enough if it's just you. One man cannot pull an entire business behind him on work ethic and determination alone. You've got to get the right people in the boat with you very early on. And I think when we were talking earlier, and I think it's in the blurb really, you've had a very low turnover of staff in the time you've got, but you've also had a very ambitious rapid growth rate, which is traditionally associated with places that have a higher turnover of staff. So what do you think it is about the way you approach those early hires, the ongoing hires, that have meant you've had the right people with you, grow with you, and stick with you?
So I look back on our 8 years, and there's probably been 2 people that really do come to mind that when we've lost them, been absolutely gutted to lose them and didn't want them to go, but understood their reasons. And there's one I can think of who we did end up saying, look, honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would take the opportunity that you've been given. Can't offer you that. It wasn't specifically about rec. It was in the global wider sports industry. And they've been going for decades. I can't offer you that opportunity right here, right now. And if I was where you are now, I'll take it. So we're still on good terms and good friends. I think the big thing, and I don't put all this at my door, Scott's amazing at this as well. I think it's a partnership between us. I think it is getting people who understanding what they want in life, not just in work, but actually in life, ensuring that we can provide that from the beginning and continue to provide that as they're developing through their journey with us as well, because that changes, right? I've been through that same thing myself. And making sure that we're honest and real with them, making sure that we understand them as people. I think the work thing starts to go out the window a little bit because I actually care about my people. So my first mantra is, it's not about whether the business is doing well. If my people are doing well, the business can't fail to do anything but well. If we're paying out as much as we can be paying out, it's only because they're out there doing amazing, performing well, selling, and so on as well. So it's a nice problem to have that I'm having to pay silly commission checks, 150 grand commission checks, and so on as well, which we've done. That's where I come to it first. That extends into the personal. And I like to think that I can't do it with everyone, but those who either report directly to me or have been here the longest on that journey with us, I think we're friends. I like to think that I've got good understanding of them personally, what makes them tick, what's going on in their private lives, that they're able and comfortable enough to come to us with family issues or wider things which do affect them when they're here.
But it's funny you should say that, because we were talking off air before we came on, and I share this view very much with Ro, the way in which you treat your staff, because we had some sayings that we used to talk about in those days. The company that drinks together stays together. Apparently, according to Kirsty, you can't say that now. You have to say the company that plays together stays together. But she's not here.
She's not here now.
Well, the company that drinks together. The 90s was a very drinking culture, and I know it isn't now. But there's this idea of playing together, that kind of getting to know people outside of a work environment, and it turns them, if they're not friends per se, you're not going to invite them around for Christmas or go on holiday with them, but they're friendly. They're above just employees who are on the payroll. They're people who are a bit more than that with you, to a greater or lesser extent. And those people will work harder for you and stay longer with you. And when you drop the baton, because everybody does, they'll help you pick it up, as opposed to wait till your arse is shining and give it a good old kick. And I think that's a really important part in a business, because the other thing I've noticed with very successful smaller businesses particularly is they tend to have a very stable team. It's stable, in other words, it's not volatile, it's not chopping and changing all the time. And that stability eventually ends up in a more productive team, which is a more profitable team. So those hire 'em and fire 'em outfits never tend to do as well, I don't think, as people have built that stable. Would you say it's a family environment? Would you say, I know it's a bit cliched, but would you say it's a family environment?
It is. I've seen a lot more content recently of you should never call your business and team a family for this and that reason and blah, blah, blah. But look, I know, I'm not going to go into any individual details, but we've had several people who have been impacted post-COVID, and even a little bit before, with cancer issues in terms of wider family members and things like that. And the thing that I'm proud of is that they've always been comfortable enough to come and talk to us about it, and we've supported them as much as we could do through that as well. Those kind of issues, as well as the wider issues, and it's not just one-sided. Where I've had stuff going on in my personal life, I've felt comfortable and close enough to my direct people to say, listen, I've got this going on. I'm trying to battle through it. I'm trying to focus on the rest of it. But there's some issues that are going to crop up or whatever. I'm going to need your help on a little bit as well. And I don't feel awkward enough to come to them with some of those things if I do think I'm going to need something covering. So we've got that level of personal relationship with them. We know the families and the parents of a lot of our people as well. I've got people's mums on my Instagram that I message back and forth and things like that as well. And thank you messages and stuff. So
yeah, I think that is a family environment, and it's very. I don't necessarily agree with the concept that family is outdated in business. I know that's been bandied around, as you said there, but I think it's a good thing because it means that people belong, and there's an element of trust.
I was just about to say, it creates, in psychology, and anybody who's read any of the Simon Sinek type stuff, it's psychological safety. You feel safe to do what you literally just said there, Ro, to say, I think I'm about to break something, or I broke something, can somebody help me? And it's, we've all had it, with a buddy, a work buddy, that one person you can go over and say, I just fucked up, can you help me cover it up? But to be able to have it with your boss and your subordinates, your direct reports, to be able to have that kind of culture, that's quite hard to produce for a lot of people, because there's that fear of punishment that they're ingrained into us across most of our careers starting out. So there was something this is going to be the last question really, because then I want to move on to how you handle this kind of culture when you opened the first new location in the US. But there was something you and Mike both talked about while we were prepping for this, a phrase that you'd both used 20 years apart, really, come to you in your own way. And I wondered if you could just talk about that, because I think it ties into that psychological safety, a conversation you had in the car.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact phrase that was used now.
Well, let me put my phrase in there because it triggered your phrase, actually. I got this thing where my view is there's nothing you can break that I can't fix. Because what you're actually transmitting there, really, is you're actually saying is that I trust you, but if you drop the button, I'm there for you. I'll sort it out with you. You'll be fine. Don't be afraid of failure, because the fear of failure holds people back. It keeps them within themselves. They won't experiment and move forward and develop to their potential. They'll just be in case they might fail, so they don't do anything. And endemic in the civil service, they tell me, who knows? But in entrepreneurial businesses, it's a killer. And if you say to them, either physically, actually say to them, articulate in these words, or communicate in another way, look, if you screw up, I'll fix it. Don't worry. Just go out there and be you. And you said on the way up, you'd had a conversation, I think, in the car on the way up today, I think it was, along those same lines.
Twice, actually. One in the car today and one with someone yesterday. And I'm 100% going to nick your phrase as well, Mike. But
it's all yours. I gift to you, Ro.
I'll just make sure none of my guys listen to this, and then they think it's mine. But no, look, what my take on it is, and I was saying this to someone yesterday, of I will never have a go at someone or pull someone out for trying to do something and getting it wrong. We'll look at as to where and why it's gone wrong and make sure that there's a change of tact. But you'll never have me pulling you out for trying to do something, even if you didn't know how to, and then it not working or it going wrong. The thing that is important to me is when something has gone wrong and when we have made a mistake in something, that we look at it, we analyze, and we understand why, so we don't make the same mistake twice for the same reason. The end issue might still arise and the end result might still happen, but it should always be for another reason that we've not either had the experience or not foreseen for whatever reason. It shouldn't be the same mistake twice for the same reason. That's the thing that is more important to me. But I want everyone trying things. And that's why I've got people 12 months, 18 months experience going out and selling retainers to founders and CEOs of businesses, because they're not afraid to go out and try. They're not afraid to put themselves out there.
It's how you learn, Ro, isn't it? It's how you learn. You can learn in a classroom, and that's great. It's brilliant. You can learn in a teaching environment. But actually, when you come to apply that knowledge, when you get exposure to the world where you can use what you've learned, that's where you really learn. And if people are afraid to move into that space and give it a go, then you're never really going to get the most out of them. And I don't know whether you've heard the expression shouty management, because there's a lot of shouty management in recruitment, I'm afraid. Typically, when you don't hit the target or something, then there's either actual shouty or a subliminal, what do you call it, Pete? Passive aggressive, I think, or whatever. But it's a form of shouty management. And I think the exact opposite is important, is to celebrate failure. Why? Well, because we can all move forward because of this now, because of what you've done. There's a difference if it's failure through incompetence or being slapdash or not working hard enough. That's different. But if people have done their best in an environment that we gave them, and we realize they haven't got the skills, like you playing golf earlier, or they've got the skills, but we didn't know something that we needed to know, that's fine. That's crack on with it. And obviously it causes people to stick around, doesn't it? People like that.
Yeah, they've got that opportunity to go out and try things without that fear of being pulled up, essentially.
Yeah, and I think I'll draw a little bit of a line under this people conversation, because I think it's starting to hit the same markers. And if I may summarize briefly, you've talked about attitude, you've talked about alignment within the business, and you've talked about approach. You've not talked about hiring really good 360s. You've talked about building something that is safe for people, that they come into, they try, they develop, they get better, and then they want to stay because they like the environment. And I can see now, I'm starting to understand now how 8 years, 0 to 20, becomes clear a little bit. The magic is falling away with reality. But I do want to pick up, because one of the big challenges I know from recruitment and working with lots of recruiters is that a lot of businesses, not just recruitment, one of the big challenges is when you open a new location that's far away, how do you maintain a cultural alignment? How do you stop it drifting wildly into something else? So could I speak to you now a little bit about your experiences with the US market, when you went into it, what that was like for you, and how you kind of kept that cultural alignment to the UK?
So what we've done in the US actually is predated, and the lessons learned from what we tried to do in Leeds. So most of the people would have put that down as a failure. And again, I don't use the term failure for this. We did open up a Leeds office just after I got married, because I remember doing the interviews on honeymoon from Hawaii. I remember having to do them like 2, 3 a.m. and it didn't work. Like the person that we had running Leeds, and we had a team of about 4 or 5 there at one point. We had to end up closing the Leeds office within about maybe a year or just over a year. And we didn't spend enough time with that individual who's running Leeds to integrate him into the FB culture. Like we had planned to do so, and they did come into Notts and London and the rest of it, but it wasn't enough time. So I don't look at that as a failure, because that actually set us up and changed our approach. We may have done the same thing in the US if we hadn't have had the experience of Leeds. So when we set up the US, rather than setting up with someone who's completely new to FB, what we did is we gave the opportunity to some of our very best who were in the UK across London and Notts. So to set up New York, we actually relocated 5 of our best people out there, 5 or 6 of our best people out there, across sales, which included actual sales, some management, some leadership, and operations as well. So when you talk about the cultural thing, they bleed the culture. They are the culture. They've been like, Grant was one of the very first through the door. He was pretty much the very first through the door in our Nottingham office. Samir joined us back in July the 11th, 2016. So they've grown up right through from rookies with about 4 and 6 months experience each to leaders and SVPs in the business now. They understand. When I talk about culture, I don't just mean the nicey things. I don't mean just the play or the eat. Our version of that, Mike, is eat together and experience together. That's big for us, right? It's not just the perks of it all. It's what our sales philosophy is steeped in: control, influence, and urgency. They're the 3 things. They've grown up with control, influence, and urgency in terms of the sales philosophy. It's everything else that around. It's the standards, the expectations. It's the little things as to why, even on your lunch, if someone calls in for you, you're there, you take that call. You can be eating, but you take that call. And that's a non-negotiable. Someone answers that call within 3 rings. Those little types of things, they understand the why behind it, as opposed to just the fact that it's an FBism. And so, and the guys with them as well, Kirsch Bench and so on, Tom and so on as well, all the guys that moved out there have been phenomenal in that. So they've helped to continue to build that culture. So my concern is never the cultural element of that office. And my focus, I make sure that it's where it needs to be. But I don't go out there thinking, I need to put my finger on the pulse with the culture at the moment. Just being there, I managed to do that. But it's never a kind of a concern area, if that makes sense.
Can I ask a couple of questions? And I know we are obviously watching the time on this, but
yes,
can I ask 2 questions about moving to New York? Because I know some people are interested in starting to do business in the United States.
Yep.
The first thing was, did they begin to build up a client base whilst they were still in the United Kingdom, or did they just rock up, empty office, get the telephone, the yellow pages out, metaphorically speaking, and crack on?
I started like that. I started with the yellow pages.
Yeah, a lot of people did. Those days are gone, aren't they? Yeah, but what did they do? What did you do?
No. So we've been building. So the original plan was we were meant to be out in New York physically in 2020. Obviously, as early 2020, that got paid to, right? And then COVID, we've been operating in the sports world within the US since 2018. It's only 2 years in or so. But then 2020 happened. Off the back of 2020, towards the end of 2020, we started to slowly build it up. The guys then started going into it in 2021 and started to build up the market from there. We had business exemptions from the embassy. So we're able to fly back and forth towards about fall 21 onwards until the embassy's fully opened up. As soon as the embassy's opened up, they got their visas and then relocated out there June 22. So yeah, we've been building up the market for several months beforehand and building up the client base and leveraging the relationships that we already had in the UK European market with global businesses, essentially.
So you paid for your offices out to the reduction in airfares, then basically, really. So you were there on site. Okay. All right. Okay. I just wanted to explore that because I know, and we are going to talk about business development a little later, I know, and maybe we could talk about BD in the States as well. We could just touch on that if we have time.
Happily.
Yeah. In fact, I was going to lead us there, but first, Mike, I do believe I mean, it sounds terrible, but we do need to make a little bit of time for a word from our sponsors.
Oh, who's that, Pete?
Well, because nobody wants to sponsor us. It's you, Mike.
Oh yeah, that's me, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Very quickly, for those people that don't know, and the reason we do this is because we do all this value. And someone said to me a wee while ago now, "What do you do?" I watched the show over it. I've got no idea what you do. So here we go. Right. So we are a consultancy, business growth consultancy. We work predominantly with owners of recruitment companies that aren't happy with what they're getting from that recruitment company. Typically, the income, the freedom, and usually building up personal wealth. They don't see how that's going to happen. And most of those people in our consultancy business are prepared to grow a profit and lifestyle business. They don't want to grow and sell. They just want to maximize profits and get as much time as they can to spend with their loved ones. And what we do is work with them to make that happen. Over to you, Pete.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for being so succinct as well, because I do want to get back into the BD piece, because you were talking about, the way you launched into America was effectively to piggyback off existing relationships, which I think is not the first time I've heard that for a US launch approach. But stepping back to your wider ethos, I mean, just to throw some numbers out there for people, you were saying that this year you're looking at 50 to 70% growth. I think
all
you said.
hinging on where we land there is all dependent on November and December, which traditionally Q4 has been one of our strongest quarters. And I appreciate it's a lot of people are most of the market's been finding it tricky this year, but it's because of our BD is why we're up this year and why we're pushing towards that somewhere between 50 to 70% mark. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think you have an approach, because you've been in recruitment a while and you obviously hire people in these days, do you think your approach to BD is different to what most people do? And if so, how?
I think the first thing is, and you say hire people in these days, I'm still on pitches. I'm still speaking to people and supporting either my teams or going out and trying to drum up business, and then we'll kind of farm out to my teams and so on as well. I think the approach is, in terms of a difference maker, is consistency, first thing. Mm-hmm. I think why a lot of businesses have struggled when you look in hindsight through 23 is 22 was considered one of the biggest, best bump years ever seen type thing, right? And then lots of people talk about speccing CVs, resumes out and getting fees off the back of it, and it's as simple as that for them. I don't think we as a business do enough where we place candidates. We more fill jobs. And that's our culture. So there's some development areas in that to do. I think we could do better in that. But because of that approach relies on you going out and ensuring that as an overall business, you are doing BD activities daily. That doesn't mean just the picking up the phone bit. That means the prep bit for the BD, all the stuff that goes into the BD, the lead picking up, the lead chasing, all of that type of stuff is something that we talk about pretty much daily across our business. And I don't think it's ever where we quite want it or good enough in terms of that overall consistency. So it's a conversation we're having across an office somewhere across the business, almost most days, I would say. And it's a thing that everyone, because we've got a largely 360 environment, everyone's involved, everyone's chipping in. Even the ops side of our business help with generating opportunities. So there's so much going on from the BD front. Marketing has always got a funnel help generating opportunities as well. So firstly that. Secondly, and what we're trying to do around innovation and driving change within the industry, the product piece and so on as well, which I could talk about a whole other session on this. But a lot of my conversations with clients is how are you being represented, not just in individual role, in the particular role that we're talking about on a retained basis, how are we developing your employer brand? And they're the more interesting conversations that we're having with a lot of growth and scale organizations. I can't have that conversation with Nike. I'm not going to do much for Nike in developing their employer brand, right? But I can do for the fashion business that's going to a 500 mil rev business in the next sort of 5 years. I can do for the tech business that we're working with and so on as well. So it's that interesting piece around driving change and innovation, I think, sets us apart when we're having those bigger conversations as well.
Well, the data around that is quite distinct, really. We did some research, some original research, and we discovered that over 75% of candidates are as interested or more interested in the mission, vision, values, and culture, the EVP, as you say, of the business they're being put forward to as they are the job. And a lot of recruiters don't get that. They lead on the job, and then they're not that they're not that well informed actually about what the value proposition is of the company they're putting people forward for, because they think the job sells it, and the data is the opposite. Glassdoor did some research as well in 2021, and they discovered that the single biggest job satisfaction factor was culture and values of the business. Right. So that's not to say you could underpay people or anything, but all things being equal, what's the thing that has the biggest impact? It's the culture. And I think that recruiters are missing a trick because they don't focus on that enough. They don't really get into it with the clients. They don't really understand the EVP with the clients at all. And they certainly don't articulate that to potential candidates. Another interesting side effect on this, and then I'll hand back to you, is that, and this is anecdotal because I've got no data to support it, but it seems that if you lead on the EVP, the candidate is less likely to accept a counteroffer, because you can counteroffer a role, you can offer more money or promotion, whatever, but you can't counteroffer a culture. You can't say, well, you don't like this culture, you like that one. Well, we'll change the culture then. Not going to happen, and everyone knows that. And I think if you lead on the culture, you get less blowouts further down the line. Counteroffers. I don't know whether you find that actually, Ro.
I do agree with that, but I think issues are more systemic than that. If I'm being honest, Mike, I think. It sounds bad because I'm almost like disparaging the whole industry that I love. I think overall now, too many people don't take enough time to qualify and understand either the nature of the role. Pause the EVP part in the business for a second. And it's become more so in this market, in the UK European market, where it's now just about matchmaking, offer based of keywords and buzzwords and so on.
Sure, yeah.
And if I look at the majority of the adverts that are out there, most of them tell you, they don't sell anything. They're not selling a vision. Even the written form, the written content is just telling and informative. There's no creating a vision. There's no selling of an opportunity. There's nothing getting me excited about that business or that opportunity. When we come to the applicant side of things, I think it's so surface level understanding and qualification that it's a matchmaking thing of, I'm looking for this, have you got this? And it's as simple as that. And people aren't able to dive into whether the EVP is interesting and appealing enough when it comes to things like counter offers. Because they don't really know what that individual even wants from an EVP or from a culture or from anything. They don't really know what appeals about to that individual. They don't really know the motivations and drivers of the individual. And then you can't link it up when it comes to actually putting two people together. So yeah, technologically or skill set wise or experience, it might match. But then when you've got the founder or the CEO interviewing them, it's like, why have I even got this person? There's some things match, but culture doesn't match, ambition doesn't match. They should be in a corporate. And unfortunately, I think that's where so much of the industry is going now, and has been heading in that direction, that there's a huge thing missing there.
And I think that's going to accelerate with the emergence of AI, because a lot of people in recruitment think that AI is their savior. It's going to do all the work and increase the profits. And I think the next show that we're doing is on AI, isn't it, Pete?
That's the plan. Yeah, the plan is going to be, just very quickly, next show. I've been keeping abreast, and I'm going to have a massive dive over the next 2 weeks. And we're going to have a show talking about what the AI landscape looks like in recruitment, because there's been a lot of people who saw an opportunity, have created something, and not all of those have survived, and we left hopefully with the ones that are worth looking at. So we're going to do an AI themed show. I'm going to take people through the landscape, what I think is working, where I think things are going to be, and it's going to hopefully be a little different to the other stuff out there, because I haven't got an AI product to sell.
Yeah, that's very true.
A nice change for people.
Just on this though, I think this is a really important piece, is that it's the love of the placement that gets you through. I think the actual love of putting the right person into the right job and knowing that they're going to stay there, as opposed to getting someone in and making a bit of a fee. And I think we've built a culture in our industry which is more about the fee than the placement, and I think that's a real problem. And interestingly, just something else, I've just forgotten all about this until you said, some years ago, pre-COVID, we did an experiment. We wrote 2 job adverts for the same job, and the one led on, as you said, Ro, well, this is what we're looking for and this is what we'll pay, basically. The other one led in what's in it for you. So there's a bit of the EVP in it, but also in terms of career progression and a whole bunch of stuff, and the money as well. And then secondly, it said, oh, and this is what we want. That advert outperformed the other one at a rate of 3 to 1, because it led on what the candidate was interested in or what they would get and how it matched with their aspirations, rather than saying, have you got these skills? Because if you haven't, you can clear off. And I think it was an interesting experiment for us. And that was ages ago. We should do that again, actually, Pete, to see if it still applies. But I bet that
We
it
should.
does.
It will, because I was reading some McKinsey data that says basically, I think there's a few, I don't know about your view of this, Ro. I think there are some people out in industry, not in recruitment, but out in the industries we serve, who think that a bit of an economic slowdown is going to just create this wealth of talent, and this talent shortage situation we're facing is going to go away. And McKinsey research just went, no, it'll just be a little bit easier, but still incredibly hard, because there's just not enough good people. You have to tempt them across. People want to then keep them, which is, I think, really important. But I think I'm conscious of nearing the end of the time, and I just wanted to pick up on something you said, really, and take it up a notch around the BD piece, because the way you described it is that you're striking a very difficult balancing act, because in recruitment, delivery is very, very attention grabbing and doesn't leave space for BD. Usually you see this with recruiters. It's, I've had a really good month. I've got some roles. I'll fill them. They're all filled. Ah, crap, no pipeline. And then up and down, because they can do one or t'other. And you've got a process to somehow keep your teams aligned on both. And I think you said yourself, it's a constant battle. But I find that fascinating. So do you think you could just summarize a little bit at a high level, and then I'm going to come to you for your top tip as well. But what are your thoughts on, in fact, let's go to your top tip, because I think it ties in with how you're going to answer this question. Roheel, What is your top tip?
So my top tip for anyone who's looking to start or grow a business is, as early as possible, understand what your processes are, get it out of your head, make sure you've got complete clarity, and then make sure you communicate that in the most easily digestible way to your people, and simplify as much as possible. Process up your business as fast as possible. That's my number one.
Can I support that? I don't get a top tip. Well, I do sometimes, but I'm going to go with this one.
Not today.
Yeah, no, because you're in charge, not Kirsty. But when we sold the first business, the Americans came in at 100 miles an hour. They bowled everybody else out with their big talk and their money and their checkbooks and everything. And some months afterwards, I said, why did you do that, to the guy that bought it? And he was very kind and very generous in the words that he said. But one of the things that struck me, which disappointed me a little bit, he said, well, you're a process over people business. We like that, because people lead, but processes don't. And I was a bit disappointed, because I was convinced that we were a people business, and we kind of were. People mattered to us, but we had a lot of processes that we followed. And increasingly as well, tools are, I don't mean software tools necessarily, but a tool is just something that simplifies, speeds up, and standardizes a task. That's all it does. It makes people more productive. Process is in fact a tool, because it does those three things. And I think as soon as you move success away from individual people to a process and a toolkit and some dashboards and a person, obviously, the more successful you'll be and the more sustainable you are. Because if someone leaves and they are the thing, then the thing goes with them. If they're just part of the thing, then you just need to put someone in to replace them. And it's a world of difference. So I'm so pleased that you said that one, Ro, because I 100% agree and endorse it.
Good. So, Ro, we've got 2 minutes. I don't know if you can make it, but I want to get the maximum from you, because you've been fabulous, and you clearly know a lot of great stuff that I think people find valuable. Just, can you bring to life that top tip, that process, in the context of what we were saying there, that BD challenge of keeping people aligned and so on?
So look, I think there's so many different ways you can approach it and angles, which all have to amalgamate together as well. First of all, it's working things backwards, right? What do you want to achieve? What's that going to entail in terms of your obvious stuff of how many placements, et cetera, From there, working it all backwards. How many people are you going to actually have to converse with? Decent conversations as well. Stuff that is actually moving your business forward and your knowledge of the client forward. How many of those are you going to have? Cool. Have you got the structure to be able to do that? Is a very, very first thing, right? So come to a set of processes and structures. The thing for me is every conversation you have with everyone should be a form of a BD call. They should always do that. And a lot of people I know kind of get into that mind of, oh, I'm sourcing for a role. Cool. And so that's all they do. And everything is about sourcing. Oh, I'm lead generating. Cool. And that's everything that they do. They should be sourcing at the same time. They should be BDing at the same time. Every BD conversation, which is set up as a BD conversation, they should be talking about sourcing and so on as well, and about opportunities and so on. So every conversation for me should be a multifaceted conversation where you're achieving 3 or 4 of the overarching things, and you break that down into whatever you split it down into and stuff as well. But every conversation should be a multifaceted conversation, and you should never lose sight of the BD opportunities. I'm speaking to a data engineer in a team. Cool, they're not going to hire, but they can give you valuable information of what's going on in that department, in that team, of where the business is headed. What's the culture? What's the EVP? All things that you can use going forwards when you are either in front of a head of a department or a director or whatever. All that you can use when you are sourcing for that particular business in the future. So everything is about taking information, piecing it together, and how can I use that one little nugget to further my business development, to further my understanding. Or I don't want to go anywhere near those guys. They're about 3 months away from going under. So why are we collectively targeting them and putting so much effort into them? That is also BD. It's not just the things that you win, it's the ones that you avoid. It feeds into the strategy of what you should and shouldn't be doing, and then making sure that you're collectively sharing that across the different departments, and whether you're contracts or perm and solutions and vice versa as well. That's all BD. Your whole business needs to be built on BD. And the minute that you're relying on account management or just certain businesses feeding you things, there's a minute that I think you're massively in trouble. That should be the icing and the cherry and the bonus stuff.
Pays for the Christmas do.
Pays for the Christmas do. Don't start me on that one. I know we've got to go now, but I just wanted to support that. It took us 5 years to go from 0 to 5 million quid. And it took another 5 years to go from 5 million to 40 million quid. So in today's money, that's about 65 million pounds if you inflationed it up. The difference was a combination of account management. We began to own accounts. We began to become the apex supplier on purpose. And the other half was business development, structured, organized, and very, very measured business development. And it changed everything. So I'm not surprised that you're doing the numbers that you're doing, Ro. Got to be honest. So.
No, me neither. Ro, thank you so much. We have overrun. I apologize to you. I apologize to everybody else. Kirsty will have a field day with me about this. It's very embarrassing. But we are going to end now. So thank you so much. Ro, I think you've been on some other shows elsewhere. People want to go and hunt you down online. I'm sure they can find more insights into what we've talked about today. Mike, thank you as well for all of your contributions. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
Take care.